Rocksteady Studios is back with their latest entry in the ongoing Arkham franchise. After delivering what many consider to be some of the finest AAA comic book-based superhero video games of all time, that also featured additional spin-off games, comics, and much more, the latest entry in the Arkhamverse, known as Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League, is nothing like their critically acclaimed Batman games, for better or for worse. Spoiler alert before we get into it, it's for worse. So while I am going to try to avoid spoilers and only show gameplay from about the first 2 hours, the game is a direct sequel to the events of Batman Arkham Knight. Now, you probably have some questions in regards to how, considering that Batman is very much alive. And once again, I do not want to spoil that here or what happens or what they're saying here, but this was one of the first mind-bending decisions, in my opinion, that automatically told me that this game isn't exactly everything I want it to be from a sequel to Arkham Knight. And before people ask and question it whether it's possible that this isn't in that continuity, it definitely is, because there is an entire sequence in this game where you literally get to walk through the events of the previous series. This includes Arkham Origins, which then brings me to talk about the story in this game. It is pretty simple. Brainiac has arrived on Earth, specifically to Metropolis. A majority of our heroes have been taken over by Brainiac and are now doing his evil bidding. You are recruited by Amanda Waller, and she puts together Task Force X, aka the Suicide Squad, consisting of 4 members. Harley Quinn, who is the melee and the gun expert, King Shark, who is the melee and gun expert, Captain Boomerang, who is the melee and gun expert, and Deadshot, who is the melee and gun expert. In case you haven't figured it out after that summation, all 4 characters more or less play the same, and honestly, who you play as is just a matter of preference, because it doesn't really matter in the end. Now, you're probably going to have some questions. Since this is in continuity, why do specific things not match up? Like Harley Quinn, for example, or specifically, let's talk about Deadshot, who clearly isn't the same character. Well, don't worry, the story actually explains that, and it's a giant middle finger to the entire Arkham series. At least in terms of Deadshot. The Harley Quinn explanation is quite possibly worse, and since she is one of my favorite DC characters, I was disappointed to say the least. Anyways, now let's get into the core of the game. It is a open world metropolis, and you are constantly given task after task by Amanda Waller, which of course brings you to the boss fight. After you complete the boss fight, you got more tasks opening up more of Metropolis, and then you rinse and repeat till the game is done. The whole game will take you about 6 to 8 hours. It could take you 15 to 16, but that's in case you're just sadistic and want to do the same thing over and over, aka shoot the same types of enemies over and over into the glowing purple spots, which gets boring after about the first 40 minutes. The gameplay loop is just that. It's repetitive, it's mainly a third-person shooter, and once you get up close and personal, all of your melee attacks have almost no weight and feel very floaty and almost like they don't have that crunch that we all associate with the Arkham combat. The combat in this is honestly one of the worst parts of the entire game, among many parts that are mediocre at best. Now, going back to the characters themselves, I will say the best part of this is the team banter, their interplay, and how the characters come off. And if they were to just say that this wasn't connected to the Arkham games, I could give it a little bit more of a pass, because some of their characteristics here do not match what we've been told. But also, there are moments in this game that do shine bright. From Harley Quinn and her dry and sadistic humor, to King Shark, who is essentially just Drax the Destroyer from the MCU, having many of the same drop a line, pause for reaction, face slap because, hey, he doesn't understand what he's saying and he misses the joke. You have Deadshot, who is a straight shooter, no pun intended, but even he shows some cracks. And then you have who I would say is the clear-cut humor of the team, that being Captain Boomerang. And while I found him to be the most annoying, that's how his character is written and presented, and I think they honestly nailed Captain Boomerang in this in every regard. Since those are the playable characters, there are additional members of Task Force X and Argus that are right there in the periphery. They're mentioned and or they're giving you orders. One, I don't want to spoil. He's recently been in live action films, and honestly, it's pretty much the same here. But Amanda Waller, to me, is the standout character among all of these, because every line she delivers, every time she's on your comm, every time she confronts you, she is menacing and comes off like every version of Amanda Waller that is worthy of talking about. Stellar performance in this, bar none. Now, further talking about some of the other elements of this game that didn't work for me, and that's the whole concept of Suicide Squad kill the Justice League. And no, I do not have a problem with killing the Justice League. I have a problem with the fact that I do not care about any of these characters outside of Batman and apparently Harley Quinn, who is the same character from the Arkham games. But once again, once you play the game and see what they do with that, you're going to be a little disappointed because there's a major shift in terms of her personality and what she's saying compared to what she's done. But what I'm trying to say is this game wants us to kill the Justice League. And while that is a really cool angle to take with this game, the problem is I've never seen this version of Flash or Wonder Woman or Superman or Green Lantern. The only one I am even remotely close to understanding and knowing is Batman because I played as him. So killing the rest of the Justice League to get the Batman, to me, honestly, just felt disappointing because I didn't care about killing these characters. I had no connection to them. They never appeared in the previous games. It's like the criticism that's tossed at Zack Snyder for killing Superman in Batman v Superman. We just barely saw the character take his first flight in the previous film, and now he's dead. It takes a decade or so to establish a character that we fall in love with and grow. Look at how effective it was with Iron Man in Avengers Endgame. You get that with none of the characters outside of one. Again, that's entering spoiler territory if I talk about what happens. Most of you probably already know because it was all over the internet, but even that moment falls flat once you complete the game. I also didn't like that the game did not have a problem by essentially having you enslave Poison Ivy, who, if you know how she is presented in this game, it's a little disturbing and honestly disappointing. And for those unaware, Poison Ivy is in my top 5 DC characters of all time, and when it comes to female comic book characters, top 3. I was severely disappointed with how they used the character in this, her role in this, and just how our characters react around her and what is done with her. And that's the same song and dance I could honestly apply to multiple characters in this game, but again, trying to avoid spoilers and mentioning some of the characters that might not have been spoiled or revealed in the marketing. Now that I got all that out of the way, let me talk a little bit about how this game is played. And you guys all know it's a third-person shooter. That much is very clear. You can see that in the gameplay I captured on my PlayStation 5. But all of my problems with this game come from the aspect that this is a games-as-a-service live service game. So constantly the numbers are floating whenever you're hitting or shooting something, and you are constantly getting more gear drops and new loot. Not that I have a problem with that, but you can see that there's leftover elements that were ripped out of the game over the course of the last 9 months that the game was delayed. And they come off as almost not completely removed, but still trying to push the angle of a live service game. And then having you buy specific outfits and or faces for the characters for anywhere between $5 to $10 really puts a sour taste in your mouth, considering that you just either forked over $70 to $150 or more dollars depending on what edition you got or where you live. And to make it even worse, a lot of the time the things I was picking up were literally equal to the thing I already had. So what was the point of taking down this giant boss if the only thing I get is a gun that maybe does 100 extra damage per second and or does the same amount, but it looks slightly different? It's really just nothing to write home about, and it suffers from the same exact problem that plagued Marvel's Avengers. Now, speaking of Marvel's Avengers, since this is a games as a service and it's meant to live on, unfortunately, once you beat the game, there is very little incentive to go back into this world and try to do cool things. One of the best things about the Arkham games is once you beat them, you can go back, you can explore this world, you can take down more thugs, you can do various chores around Gotham, like, hey, picking up the rest of Riddler's trophies and things like that. And of course, to this day, there are still brand new clips, hundreds upon hundreds every month of every Arkham game, interesting takedowns and tactics, and it's something that people still talk about and post about. This game, with its simplistic combat and the world you're in, and the lack of that crunch when you hit that I talked about previously, makes it so you can't even do that. Now, any leftover quests in the post-game that you could have completed but maybe didn't, like in the old Arkham games, here, they're just mundane. It ends up being the same thing over and over. Go here, stand here, defend this wave. Go here, stand here, defend this wave. And it's just rinse and repeat. And having your fill of doing that same thing, grinding between mission to mission that's just like this to get to the new hero that you have to take down, after doing that for some 7 hours to beat the game, the last thing I want to do is do that for another 15 to clean up Metropolis. And while you can have some fun doing this in case you want to do some of the cool takedown moves, those are few and far in between, building up the meter to do them and then executing them. On top of this, there is a very cool character build style here where you can literally build a completely different character than somebody like your friend who might be playing this game, and they can actually take your character and borrow them, put them into their game. I can take one of my friends, substitute his Captain Boomerang into mine, for example, and we both benefit from it. The problem is, these changes are so minor that, again, all they do is just boost the numbers that are coming out of the enemy's head. And sometimes you're going to see a little flavor to their build, but you better understand what you're seeing. And if you're somebody that's just getting through this because, hey, I like DC and I want to see where this universe, the Arkhamverse, goes, chances are you might not even notice these differences. Again, a major problem. And the thing with this game is you are always with your team members, outside of a couple moments where story-specific reasons do something I, again, do not want to spoil. Your team is always with you, so you better get ready to get bored of these same quips over and over and over when you take down specific enemies. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard Deadshot say the same exact thing. In case you haven't picked up on it, this game has a lot of problems. And while I did enjoy the 7 to 8 hours it took me to complete the single player, that comes with a lot of caveats I just talked about, like annoying teammate doing the same thing over and over. But the thing that kept pushing me forward was the story, wanting to see how it goes, how it connects to the Arkhamverse, and how do they possibly write themselves out of this specific hole where, hey, you're gonna kill the Justice League by the time the game is over. And I do not want to spoil that for you guys, but trust me, if you can think of one of the worst ways to get yourself out of it when it comes to comics, you probably are going to be right in terms of what you expect from this ending. Because you know and understand that it's not permanent. And since it is a games as a service, much like Anthem, Destiny, The Division, and countless other games, it's going to live on support and how many people buy it, and just what the longevity of the actual game is. I can tell you without shadow of a doubt that once I completed this game, I had no urgency to go back to it. Yeah, sure, there's going to be follow-up seasons, and we know that the Joker is coming, but I'm not sure if that's going to add enough variety to be able to bring me back. Now, in the span of 2 years, we've had this game and Gotham Knights, which has its own set of problems, but not as many problems as this game for all sorts of different reasons. Both games, in my opinion, underdeliver, but this one completely goes in a different direction that most people didn't even want. Whosever idea it was to take single-player action-adventure games set in Gotham, playing as Batman, and to monetize it in a always online 4-player co-op third-person action adventure that focuses mostly on shooting in a city we never once saw in the old games, with no connection to any of these characters outside of Batman and Harley Quinn. Whosever decision that was should be the one to answer all of the fans' complaints. And trust me, there's going to be plenty. This is one of the most disappointing outcomes to what Rocksteady Studios could have made after Arkham Knight. If you're sitting on the edge of buy it or not, I would heavily advise to wait 6 to 9 months, because it will be on Game Pass and or PlayStation Network as part of your membership. And trust me when I tell you, deep discounts will be coming at this game by June. So hold off, maybe wait for a couple more patches in the first season to drop, and for them to hopefully address some of the complaints and problems. But considering they didn't really do that with Gotham Knights and WB more or less just dropped support, I have a feeling that if this game doesn't sell as well as they wanted to, kiss all types of support goodbye within the first year of content, and by the second year anniversary, this game will be dead. Just like my ambition to continue playing it.